one of the biggest things have just occurred, and I think it's worth talking about. I have a TikTok. There we go. We got the big question out of the way. I'll put it in the tab of my channel or on my bio, probably, is what I probably should have said. But in all seriousness, I may have just encountered the most perfect counter when you're comparing retro gaming to modern gaming. I didn't think this was possible until tonight. I was scrolling through online where something caught my attention, where there was discussion about the good old days in video gaming. Their counters were, or their claims were, I should say, no DLC, no early access, no $70 game, no $20 to $100 skins, no deluxe/ultimate edition, no upgrades, no anything else around that sun. Basically, countering all the modern stuff because there's DLC out there. You can purchase skins. The games are $70, early access, all that crazy shit that's going on in today's gaming. And I also found a perfect counter. There was a comment made, and it blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, that is one of, if not the most perfect counter to this argument. It goes by this. Number one, expansion packs were a thing. Plus, when done right, and he was claiming about Witcher 3, which is a really good game I recommend playing if you haven't yet, the DLCs can be great. That is true. Another big one was Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Those were fun DLCs. I enjoyed them a lot. Also, number two, game demos were in magazines before the games were released. I remember this because I had a demo copy of Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy for the PS2. I got that from a magazine when I was out with my dad one day, and I didn't realize it came with a disc. So I'm like, why is it all covered up like this? This must be worth something. So I asked my dad for it, and he purchased it for me. Got home, and I realized there was a disc inside, and the disc was Lego Star Wars 2. Now, the disc that I had, it had one level, and that was really about it. But it showed you how to play the game, so that was also our early access to the games. Games have always been expensive. Back then, they were about $40 to $50. So, yeah, there's a response to that saying, yeah, it got more expensive, but it also has a lot more to do with production versus back then. And one of the counters that it's debatable on what game you play is that the skins, people were saying that they could go up to $100. It's not completely true. Like, there's some games, yes, it can get up there, and if you purchase multiple, of course you can get up to $100. But if it's like one or two, it's not the end of the world. But I can see, talking about that, Street Fighter 2, and this is the fifth one they were discussing. Street Fighter 2 had Champions Edition, Turbo, the new Challengers, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Hyper Street Fighter 2, and Super Street Fighter Turbo HD Remix. There are different versions of the game. So when people were saying that, we just had the one copy, there were games that had different versions. And on top of that, I know it was always joked around with because they always change things, but even like the Player's Choice editions were also a thing. And they changed the game. It was different. Number 6, you can enter more coins to play or to pay to get Bernstein from the Kingdom Fighters 14. Or King of Fighters 94. I'm sorry. That was a completely different game. I remember playing 13 in college, and that must have started in my era when I realized I can't play button mashing games for a long time because they freaking hurt. EA games in the 2000s essentially had a battle pass. Unlock no items by completing certain quests. that's interesting because, like the previous stuff for the Street Fighter 2 game, that was another one that had different versions of the game. There was your player's choice options, the original, and then for Madden, for example, they had the Hall of Fame editions on some of those games. So there were different versions of the game, and they did cost more. And they kind of still do that today, but sometimes you have to also look at the past, saying that the past started it. And this one hurts me a little bit, but this is also like the number one perfect example. Pokemon is a great example of this. You had to buy 2 copies of the game and link them to get all the Pokemon. So you would have to get the games, both games, 2 different systems, depending on what they were. So if they were like Game Boy Advance, or SP, you had to get a link cable. Or if it was the DS, you could do it wirelessly, but still. And you had to do all of that just to get all the Pokemon. Because remember, and they still do it today, Pokemon have version exclusives. And so that's just funny to me how so many people are always bad-mouthing modern games when the previous set wasn't, like the previous era, it wasn't as crazy as it is today, but it definitely had its moments. And I vaguely remember a time too where Super Nintendo games were really expensive, but you can also say that about all the games. Like, I think a copy of Madden 06 back when it first came out was like $40-$50. So it's definitely a change with the price. However, they were expensive. They weren't like $5 that you could get at a local game shop. And it's not like you can get, let's say it was a good game from the past, like Pokemon, for example. You paid like $30 for a copy of Fire Red back in the day. Now you go to mom and pop shops, they're going for like $100. And so if you want to get all the Kanto Pokemon, you got to spend $100, $200, and the Game Boys could go anywhere from, I think, $50 to $100. So you're spending almost $200 plus the link cable, which could be an extra $15. So you're spending almost $250 for all of that. It's just funny to me that people always try to say like modern gaming is the worst. And it does have its flaws. I'm not saying that it's perfect or anything. It's got its flaws. But it's just that, I don't know, people are too focused on nostalgia to where they see something new and they freak out. They're like, oh no, this is really bad. This is really bad. Because I was like that once. But then I kind of grew out of it. And while I'm completely not 100% like, oh yeah, like everything brand new is awesome, there's ups, there's downs. Just like how it was in all time frames. You had good stuff, you had bad stuff. I think people were just more leaning into nostalgia because of you purchased the game and that was it. Which is still a thing. It just depends on modern gaming and requirements. But that's all I want to talk about. You guys have a good one. Follow me on TikTok.